He's a retired police officer with 45 years on the job. He is diagnosed with CPTSD. He's here to talk about some traumatic, violent shootings he was involved in and how they impacted his life. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is brought to you in part by Newsbreak. Our profile on Newsbreak. Do a search on Newsbreak for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. You can do a Google search. Just type in Law Enforcement Talk Newsbreak and you'll find our profile. Best of all, Newsbreak is free. You can download the app and have it on your phone for free. Get local news, get local information. You can get national news, all that stuff for free. The Google search is free, the website is free, and the app is free. So be sure when you have a chance to Google search for Law Enforcement Talk Newsbreak, follow us, and check out our articles. Remember, best of all, it's free. Joining us from Texas, we have retired Fort Worth Police Department Officer Kevin Foster on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. He's author of 2 books, Fort Worth Cops, The Inside Stories. Also, the new book, End of Watch, Fort Worth's Fallen Officers, 1873 to 2024. First of all, Kevin, thanks for your service. Secondly, thanks for being guest on the show, talking about what you went through. I both very much appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And I got thrown in the notes here because, and I hate initials, but you were diagnosed with CPTSD some time ago, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on. You did 45 years on a job. It's kind of impossible to be a modern-day police officer in America in any city, and that also includes sheriff, state police, whatever you wanted, troopers, whatever terminology you want to use. In my opinion, it's almost impossible to go through this and not get dinged up mentally and or physically.
Yeah, I'd go along with that 100%.
Yeah, we've seen some horrific things and been through horrific things. And I got to say this, Kevin, in passing, before we get to your story. It's not the cases that we solved that bother me. It's the ones we couldn't solve. That's the one that I lose sleep over. But what inevitably happens for me, if I don't keep my mind occupied with certain positive things, if I don't do certain things, these thoughts of really horrific situations come into my head when I least expect them and are least wanted.
Yeah, I've found that myself.
Yeah. We'll talk about your solutions for that in a few moments. So I want to get into your career a little bit. There's 2 major incidents you're involved in. I'm sure that's just 2 out of literally thousands, but both involved extreme violence, extreme shootings, all that stuff. I've been involved in 4 shootings in my career in a little less than 11 years. And the last one physically injured me and also did, I would say, emotional damage is the term I like to use. But you can't walk away from this stuff and just be the same guy you were before. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're 100% right.
Let's talk about the first one. You were involved in a life or death shooting when the suspect was trying to seize your weapon. I went through that. That was the last shooting. The guy tried to shoot me in my face with my own service weapon while still in my hand. And I thought I sprained my wrist at the time. It turns out I had multiple surgeries, multiple steel plates put in, and my career was over at 33.
Yeah, I went through one where the suspect did take my weapon from me, and we had a pretty good fight. It's all started one afternoon. I was with my partner. Our shift had just started, and probably 15 minutes into the shift, on a nice sunny afternoon, we saw these 2 men doing a dope deal in an alley. We got out of the car. They fled from the alley up between 2 houses. So we followed up there. We weren't sure quite where they went, and we found them on the sidewalk on a major thoroughfare. So my partner went to talk to one, and I talked to the other. And while I was identifying him and beginning to play the name game, I'm sure you've had to do that a few times, he decided that he was going to get away from me, so he rammed me with his body, putting a shoulder into my hip and my stomach to knock me down. It didn't work, and I caught him, and I had hold of him, and I hollered at my partner, and he came running over. And as he got there, he tried to handcuff him, and I felt a tug, and I looked down, and my pistol was in this guy's left hand, just with so quick it was ridiculous. So I yelled, "He's got my gun." So my partner then decided to push us both down. He hit us with some force, and I hit the ground pretty hard with the suspect on top of me, and he was still standing behind the suspect. And I looked up, and the suspect had my pistol in both hands, and he was trying to shoot me in the face. He was going back and forth, and I was squirming, trying to get away. You have to excuse me. I haven't told this story for more than probably a half dozen times in the last 40 years.
You need to take a break and take a swallow of a cup of coffee. That's fine, because there's certain things, and I'll be honest, Kevin, I'll be honest with you, there's certain things I don't talk about with people because they haven't earned the right to know. And some of them are police. Going back into it, I'm trying to get away. He's trying to track my head. I'm screaming at my partner to shoot him. And there came a time, and the time seems exaggerated, but I thought I was going to die. And I actually remember turning my head and shutting my eyes. When that happened, shots started being fired. Dirt started flying in my face, and the guys on top of me were literally on top of me on the ground. We're face to face, touching face to face. And I could see past him. I saw my pistol still in his hand. So I grabbed it and his hand and pulled him in between the two of us, and I shot him 4 times. Then I gave him a hard blow and knocked him off of me. And it was then, looking at him, I realized my partner had shot him as well, shot him in the back while he was on top of me. And those were the bullets that were hitting by my head. The man was obviously dead at this point. He'd been shot at this point a half dozen times. We were carrying revolvers. And I looked at my partner, and he pulled out our hand radio. Now, in this particular time, we didn't have very many hand radios at the Fort Worth Police Department. And if you worked with another officer, only one of you got the hand radio. So at this point, I'm hurt. I'm on the ground. I'm a little bit shot. Come on my hands and knees. And I lift up a little bit, and I'm looking at my partner. He's talking on the radio. And then from behind me, gunfire started. The first shot hit him in the leg, and he did a literal somersault. Wait a second. This is another gunshot, but your suspect was dead.
Our suspect was dead. This was another person, possibly the person he'd been talking to, but we never were sure about that. So the second the gunman came out, my back was to him. I didn't know he was there. He started shooting, and my partner did the somersault. He hit the ground, dropped the radio, dropped his pistol, and scooted back to cover behind the house. I turned and looked at this guy, and he is standing not more than 10 yards from me at a point shoulder position, and he's looking right at me, and he is firing his gun. As I was moving, I was diving towards the ground, already on my knees, just falling forward, and I fired my last 2 rounds back at him. He jumped behind a fence. I knew how many rounds I had fired before, and I knew how many rounds I fired then, so I knew I had to reload. So right. I'm up on my knees. I get my speed loader out, and I'm putting it in, and as I'm putting the speed loader into the cylinder, he comes back around again, and he opens fire a second time. Again, he couldn't have been 10 yards from me. And as I slammed the cylinder shut and pointed at him, and I started firing, and just as I fired the first shot, directly behind him, a woman came out of the house with a baby in her arms.
Oh, my goodness. We're going to take a short break. We'll return this conversation in a few moments. We're talking with Kevin Foster, retired Fort Worth Police Department officer, author of 2 books, Fort Worth Cops, The Inside Stories, and End of Watch, Fort Worth's Fallen Officers, 1873 to 2024. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere, I promise you. Lots of great stuff heading your way. We'll be right back.
Looking for love but tired of the games? Shot at Love is your ultimate playbook for finding the real thing. Written by Carrie Brett, celebrity photographer, podcaster turned dating expert. Learn insider secrets, proven strategies, and inspiring stories to help you. Whether you're starting over or leveling up, Shot at Love gives you the confidence to take your best shot. Get it at shotatlovebook.com. Shotatlovebook.com. That's shotatlovebook.com.
Return conversation with Kevin Foster, retired Fort Worth police officer, Fort Worth, Texas, on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. He's authored the books Fort Worth Cops, The Inside Stories, and End of Watch, Fort Worth's Fallen Officers, 1873 to 2024. Before we went to break, and he's diagnosed with CPTSD, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. During the last segment, before we went to break, you're talking about this extended shootout with a suspect. You got attacked by one, you fought for your gun, he got control of your gun, he was shot multiple times, killed, and then another person starts opening fire on your partner. And was your partner hit?
He was hit in the right leg. And I was looking at him as he was shot, and he did a literal somersault on the hitting the sidewalk, dropping his gun, dropping the radio, dropping everything.
And before we went to break, you said that you were involved with the shootout and you went to reload, which we'll talk about in a few moments because I'm an old revolver cop too. And one of my last shootings that came into play, that a woman walked out with a baby. All of a sudden, that's my biggest nightmare still to this day.
Yeah, it was even worse is as I fired that shot, I saw her, the gunshot goes off and her shoulder dropped and she went down about a foot and then fell back into the house. Or I say fell, she went back into the house she had just stepped out of. And I didn't know if I'd shot her. I had no idea if she was shot. The suspect that I was having the gunfight with, I don't think had expected me to get reloaded again, so he jumped back behind this fence again. At that point, I'm feeling like I'm alone on an island. I'm screaming for my partner. I can't see him. He is buttoned down behind some bushes along the side of a house, and I'm yelling at him, come on, let's go. So he got up and he started hopping, and we were going backwards towards there was a fence behind us with a business on the other side that was like a small restaurant. He made it around the corner, and I was backing up, and there was a Coca-Cola truck parked there with those soft drink trucks that open on the sides that have those huge tires. So I got down behind the tire where I could watch where I had last seen the shooter, as well as look to my left where I could see the alley where he might be coming out of. And I held that position for about 2 minutes by myself, waiting for this guy to come back, waiting for sirens.
And when the sirens, we hear them, it's always the cavalry's on the way. At least it was for me.
Yeah, it was. It was a wonderful sound to hear. But the first police unit didn't know where we were. And like I said, it was a thoroughfare. So I hear him coming. I'm still focused there. And then the police car blows right by me doing about 60 miles an hour. Never saw me there.
Right.
And I stood and waved down and then figured, what the hell am I doing? I got back down behind that tire again so I could keep watching. And then the next car came along, actually saw us and stopped. And from that point, the cavalry arrived and we were safe.
Did the other suspect finally get apprehended, or what was the outcome for him?
He was arrested, I think, 2 days later. And eventually the prosecutor decided not to prosecute him on the case.
That's always a winner with police, isn't it?
Yeah, the story was that this young man thought we were being too violent with his friend, so he decided that he would defend his friend. So the DA decided that he would let him go on a defense of a third person defense.
Your partner had been shot, and you were almost killed.
Yeah, so far that day I'd been shot at numerous times, and the day wasn't over yet. I remember from that point, everyone started getting there. The detectives were there, And they put me in a car and took me downtown, and I had to go to the homicide division. Back then, we didn't have a special unit to investigate police shootings. We had homicide detectives that would come out, and they'd come out and have you sign a Miranda warning, and then tell you to tell the story, and they would write it out for you and have you sign it. But during this wait, I was sitting up in the homicide office, and it was only then that I discovered I was absolutely covered in blood, my entire shirt. I looked at my stomach, and when we were fighting, we were face to face, hand to hand, touching each other. I pulled the gun in between the two of us. So I hadn't even realized until then that what a mess I was. And as a result, my uniform shirt was taken from me and put into evidence, along with my name tag and badge and everything else. They took my gun belt, my gun, my speed loaders, and that day they sent me home wearing my uniform pants and a T-shirt.
Right.
Undershirt that I've been wearing.
And by the way, that's a big deal. Look, I can't. A lot of people don't understand this. First of all, you barely survive. You feel all of the gratitude. You feel the mixed emotions. You feel the adrenaline afterwards. At least I did. I didn't feel it when it was going on. But one of my biggest fears, besides shooting an innocent person, and still have nightmares over it, was being stripped of all the police stuff that you worked so hard to. Because I'll be honest with you, it was part of my identity. It's part of who I was.
Yeah, it was for me too. And they, after having the day that I had, they're seeing me out the door of the police department in a pants, T-shirt, and unarmed, so that I could go drive home.
Boy, that brings back memories. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And not good ones.
No, there was nothing good that came out of this. After that one happened, I became, I think the best word I heard there, I was a bit grumpy. Yeah. I was bad-tempered. I drank too much.
Join the club, Kevin. When they say salty sergeants, my picture ought to be next to that guy in the dictionary.
Yeah, I'm telling you, there were, I'd have, sometimes at night I'd wake up screaming and fighting and thrashing. And sometimes they were so bad that I would just go ahead and get up. You know, I didn't want to have the dream again. I didn't want anything. So it's just easier to go find something on TV.
We'll go back to that in a moment. One of the things that the last generation, which is eerily similar to yours, fortunately, everybody survived. I survived, the bad guy survived, all that stuff. No one was shot, even though lots of shots were fired on my face and his face, and there was a battle of life and death. I remember clearly having this thought come into my mind, and I want to paint the picture. It's not like you do a lot of thinking, and they say you rely on your training. That's true. But a lot of it is, I'll do anything to survive. And I remember sitting there thinking, this guy's trying to kill me. I'm going to die, but it won't be tonight, and it won't be because of anything you do. And at that point, I was ready to do whatever it took to live through it.
Yeah, and with my training, when I was having that second gunfight, I did textbook reloading of the revolver, of holding it in my left hand, flipping open the cylinder with two middle fingers, and putting the speed loader in there and shutting it with the thumb again. It was
and by the way, that's not easy to do.
Practiced 100 times.
We're talking with Kevin Foster. He's retired police officer in Fort Worth Police Department. Talking about a protracted, long shooting he's involved in. He's authored 2 books: Fort Worth Cops: The Inside Stories. Also, End of Watch: Fort Worth Fallen Officers from 1873 to 2024. This is a Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. If you do any business on social media, creating content is one thing. The trick is, how do you turn those people that comment on your social media into consumers? There's a great tool, and you can get more information at letpops.com. That's letpops.com. Best of all, you can get started for free. letpops.com. Check it out today.
Got questions about your Medicare coverage? Who doesn't? Take a few moments to get real answers and options, all for free. Call 866-427-1225. 866-427-1225. 866-427-1225. or visit lethealthy.com, lethealthy.com, lethealthy.com to learn more.
Return our conversation with Kevin Foster. He's a retired police officer, 45 years on the job from the Fort Worth Police Department in Fort Worth, Texas. He is diagnosed with CPTSD, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. And before we went to break, Kevin, you talked about this long, protracted shootout you had with two suspects, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Yes,
he's
sir.
author of 2 books, Fort Worth
Yes.
Cops, The Inside Stories, which he's co-author of, and End of Watch, Fort Worth's Fallen Officers, 1873 to 2024. Before we went to break, you started talking about, look, I got grumpy, and I'm still, some people say I'm still a little bit grouchy. I have a very short fuse for, let's say, idiocy and time wasting. And the older I get, the less tolerant I am of people wasting my time. But when this stuff happened, I wound up getting very short fused. And it was because I couldn't relax at all. And part of it was, for me, was the last shooting I was involved in, I would start falling asleep, and I would, right in that area where you start falling in deep sleep, I'd hear gunshots right next to my ear, and almost like an electric charge through my scalp, and I'd wake up, and I'd be in it, and I'd have everything you talked about. And when I went out in public, I was always on. I was never off. And I became very short with people, and then I learned this thing called disassociation, where we go, my wife at the time would call mini vacations, where I just disconnect. And I stopped eating, I stopped showering, I stopped all that stuff. And by the time I was in my early 30s, I was on the way out. It was bad. And I was drinking excessively every night to fall asleep.
I can certainly relate to that. From that first shooting I was in, my partner never really recovered. He ended up taking a psychological problem-based medical retirement. And
what year was that?
I believe he took the retirement late 80s.
Wow,
this shooting had happened in 1984.
That's pretty progressive for the 84, because back then, like in Baltimore, they didn't have that. And there's still a lot of East Coast agencies still don't really recognize mental disabilities. The West Coast ones are more progressive about that. I'm surprised that Fort Worth, Texas, because they have a reputation of being no nonsense, that they even offered that.
Well, fortunately, the police department didn't control the pension fund and the pension decisions. That was made by a separate board. So it was easier in Fort Worth to get that. They still would look at you as a sign of weakness. For instance, on that first shooting I was in, I was back at work the next day.
Right.
That was expected of you. No time to cool off. No, cool down period. Nothing. You're just back to work.
Yeah, you were the same era as me. We didn't have peer supports. We didn't have critical incident stress debriefing. We didn't have any of that stuff. We had a parking lot and a case of beer. That's what we had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is very familiar. We did have the same thing in Fort Worth for a long time.
Here's the thing. I got to ask you this as a former question. Kevin, when really bad stuff happened in our shift, we would do that. And I think talking with other people helped. The alcohol became a problem, but it wasn't the proper, let's say, the healthiest way to deal with it. But it did help somewhat. Did you find any relief from hanging out with your peers and talking to them?
I did talk to one or two. I never felt really comfortable with that, but I discovered another outlet. And no one had told me about it. I just discovered it. And that is, if I would sit down and write myself to myself and write the story about what had happened. And it gave me a chance to go more in depth into everything that had happened and look at it almost from a third person detached standpoint. And it became a habit with me. And this one that continues to this day.
You still write about these things?
Yes.
I find that when I write about some of this, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but they say that, this is what I was told years ago, that writing, the actual act of writing something, uses the same side of brain as the emotions and artistic side. And when I write, I tend to be more truthful, more honest. And I'm not saying I lie. What I'm saying is I tend to justify, minimize, and all this other stuff. But when I write, man, quite often I get emotional.
Yes, so much so when we did the book, the Inside Stories book, my writing partner suggested I write about the second shooting, the one where I had an active shooter and another officer was shot. He suggested that I write that story. And I told him, I'm not going to write the story.
Did you ever write it?
I did, eventually. And we had an editor. A woman was also writing with us that had written for the Star-Telegram, and she had covered it. So she said she would write it. And I said, fine, if you do write it, I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to edit it, and I'm not going to look at it.
Boy, you're cut from the same cloth as me. I don't read a lot of things. I don't watch body cam videos. I don't watch any of that stuff because it fires things up. Yeah, it did. But eventually, before it came out, I decided I'm putting this book out. My name's on it, and my name's on this chapter. It's about what I went through. I'm going to have to read it. So I did read it, and I made some changes to it. So that story is actually the first story in the book. Are you was called Facing the Devil. Are you able to talk about what happened during that incident? I think so. Essentially what happened, and you have to remember Fort Worth is kind of a wild city. By this time I'd been a sergeant for a number of years. And we had a beautiful Sunday morning and about 8 a.m. and my goal for the day was to read the Sunday paper. And that was about it. That's what ruined everything right there. Nice, slow start to the day, and I'm going to do this. Uh-oh. I want my coffee and a Sunday paper. So at 8 o'clock, a shooting call went out. This dispatcher said, a man shot his wife. You look at your watch and say, okay, I'll be done with this in about an hour and a half. And because we handled those so much, there were so many shootings in Fort Worth back then. So I started heading that way, and as I'm getting close to it, I start hearing rifle fire. Then one of my officers is screaming on the radio. Excuse me. Sorry. When people, by the way, when people scream on the radio, when other police scream on the radio, it almost curdles your blood. Yeah. So I get there, and I'm pulling up. I see only one of my officers. And she is at the entrance to this apartment complex. She is down on one knee. She has her pistol in her hand, and the entire right side of her face is a mask of blood. There's no skin showing. It's just blood, like you would see out of a horror show. Her right arm is covered in blood. Blood is running down her hands, and she's a bit panicked. And the first thing, and rifle fire is still going on. I'm having to park and get out. And the literal first thing that went through my mind was my wife is 7 months pregnant. Anyway, she was, excuse me. It's all right. By the way, you're amongst people that have been through really bad stuff, so this is understandable. It's understandable reaction. I just want you to understand that and know that. Well, there was a funny moment later after when this was all over, and I was talking to that officer in the hospital. I told her the hardest thing I ever had to do was to get out of that car. And she looked at me and she said, why? I said, because my butt kept sucking up all that seat every time I tried to get out. I've had Naugahyde, about a yard of Naugahyde, and you know what? And orifices that don't belong. We're talking with Kevin Foster. He is retired from the Fort Worth Police Department, and he's talking about a couple of really bad shootings he was involved in. He's co-author of the book, Fort Worth Cops, The Inside Stories, and also authored the book, End of Watch, Fort Worth's Fallen Officers, 1873 to 2024. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Imagine earning an extra $500 to $5,000 a month or more from the comfort of your home or business, all with Facebook. That's right. Meta is paying people just like you every month. Learn how to create another revenue stream from Meta and dramatically increase your reach, all without breaking your own time bank. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Here's your chance to get into the ground floor, to make a donation to make the movie Gun Runner. based off of the true story of now retired police detective Maria Oliveira, who shot 6 times while investigating a crime, died 3 times, brought back to life, has been in a hospital for a month, rushed back to work, only to suffer a near-fatal heart attack, and then several months later, a near-fatal stroke. It talks about his recovery, his life after, and more. That's at gunrunnerfilm.com. Again, you can make a donation at a gunrunnerfilm.com.
Your golden years are supposed to be easy and worry-free, at least in regards to finances. If you are over 70, you can turn your life insurance policy into cash. Visit letsavings.com. That's letsavings.com. letsavings.com. Or call 866-480-4252. Again, that's 866-480-4252 to see if you qualify.
Return conversation with Kevin Foster on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Kevin's retired from the Fort Worth Police Department in Texas. He is diagnosed with CPTSD, 45 years in law enforcement. He's co-authored the book Fort Worth Cops, The Inside Stories, and also authored the book End of Watch, Fort Worth Fallen Officers, 1873 to 2024. Before we went to break, Kevin, you talked about this other, and this it doesn't raise alarm bells in me. When people say, oh my God, that officer was involved in 3 shootings in her career, and like there's something wrong with him. No, that's called doing your job. We didn't volunteer for really bad stuff, but bad stuff happened, and we had to handle it.
Yeah, that's 100% right. It's like this shooting. The getting back into it with the officer shot there, and I have an officer missing now, and I was yelling for him, and he finally answered, so we didn't have to go in. And there was a nearby church, and 2 officers were working off duty at the church, and they came running up. So now there's 4 of us there. The officer who's been shot won't get out of the fight, so I have her stand behind me. And this is 4 years before Columbine, but we decided, all right, the 4 of us are going to go up this staircase, and we're going to get him. And just as we did that, he yelled, don't hurt me, I'm coming out. And we heard him put his guns down. He put a couple of guns down, and he came down the steps. I reached up, grabbed him, tossed him down to the other officers, and people were standing there on this landing of upstairs of this apartment complex, pointing at an apartment. So I ran down to that apartment. The door was kicked in. There was a woman laying on her back. She'd been shot twice in the head, once in the chest, and she was still alive. She wasn't breathing. I reached down. She was partially in the closet. I pulled her out, and she started breathing again. Another officer ran up, and I said, stay with her, get to the ambulance. And people were then pointing at another apartment with a broken window. I ran there and looked through the window, and the security guard for the complex was laying there. He'd woken up to the sound of the gunshot. So I kicked in his door and swept his apartment and told him help was coming. Then I came out of the apartment, and by now you probably understand that my head's spinning a little bit, going, oh my God, what's going on here? When people started pointing at the last apartment, and I went down to that apartment, and it was the apartment where the woman lived, and she lived there with her 3 children. I pushed open the door, and there was a 23-month-old girl there, shot in the head with a .45.
Ugh.
I stepped through, and there were 2 more children dead, both shot in the head with a .45. One was 8, and one was 11 years old. And as it turned out, it was a dispute over our shooter had been molesting one of the children. The mother confronted him about it, and he shot her. And when I tried to shoot her, he chased her through the complex, shooting at her until he caught her in the closet. His .45 was dry, so he pulled out a .22 and shot her 3 times. Then he reloaded his .45, went and shot the security guard, then went downstairs and shot the 3 children in the head. And from that point, now we have other officers are flooding into the complex. And I came out of that apartment, and there was another sergeant standing there, and he said, "Are you okay?" And it was at that moment I realized I wasn't breathing. And I had to stop and force myself to take a breath.
Right.
There, and then we got it all back under control. What this man had done is after he shot the children, he went upstairs back to his own apartment, got an M1 carbine, and went and stood on the balcony overlooking the entranceway, waiting for us to show up. and shooting at random people and shooting at us in our cars. And from where I got out of my car, there were bullet holes behind me. I didn't ever see the flash, but apparently he was shooting at me as well as the others. Fortunately, he missed a lot. I'm thinking he fired around 70 rounds that day.
One of the things that jumps about this conversation, look, when you said you realized you weren't breathing, and when people say, are you okay? My standard answer was always, yeah, I'm fine, but no, I was not okay. And quite often I was not fine. And that translated into, and the best way I can put it, Kevin, is I tried to psychologically be Jay the cop, Jay the sergeant, all that other stuff. And then we took my soft body armor off. I transitioned mentally into Jay the husband, Jay the father, all that stuff, and tried to, and I did well with that for years until it stopped working. There come a point in your personal life where you started saying, this is not working, I'm having problems?
That has happened to me. I'd actually, after I retired from Fort Worth, I moved on to a small private college police department where I became a lieutenant, and I started having more and more problems with the chief of police there and with some other members of the faculty, and to the point where I knew it wasn't all them. I knew it was me. And
it can't be everybody else all the time. Sometimes they're pointing those fingers back at us.
Right. So I went to my doctor and said, look, I'm stressed out. And he said, well, I need you to go see this psychologist. So I did. And had a few sessions with him. And during these sessions, he told me that I had chronic complex PTSD. And he told me that from what he had learned from me, from talking to me, that the main thing, that my fight or flight mechanism was completely broken.
Join the club. That means don't fight for me.
Everything was set. Oh, yeah, you look at me the wrong way, we're going to have a fight.
That's the way I got too, Kevin. Trust me, you're covering the same cloth as me. I don't turn into this meek, mild guy. I'm turning into, oh, yeah? Really? We want to go there? Let's go.
Yes, and it's, a suspect would say something, and I would just reach out and grab him by the shirt and almost jerk him up off his feet, and like, okay, rein it back in, you can't kill him. So it was one of those deals. But I managed to make it through that college, and when I did retire all the way, I couldn't retire. I sat at home for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I think I changed my sweatpants once and my T-shirt twice.
Right.
And I said, okay, I got to get a job. I got to get out of here and do something. So I managed to get hired back on by the Tarrant County Sheriff's Department. Fort Worth is in Tarrant County, Texas. And it seemed to be just exactly what I needed. It was a little bit scaled back from what I was doing before, but still, as I tell people now, my PTSD is so bad, I have to do something sketchy at least once a week just so I can feel normal.
That's the thing, and I jokingly say this, but it's so true. When I was on the job doing sport, I knew what to do. I knew my role was, and quite honestly, I must have been addicted to people shooting at me because I did it quite often, and I kind of liked the rush afterwards. However, for me, the real problem started when things got quiet. When I retired, and now what? Now it's a stinking thinking. Now it's all the negativity of the past and worries about the future for me. At what point, and by the way, before we get into writing your books, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. There are some things, obviously, that I don't like talking about and I won't talk about. But I'm doing pretty well. My co-workers and I get along great. I transport inmates quite often now, and it doesn't seem to bother me near so much anymore. I think I may have gotten old enough now to where most of this is behind me. I'm for the most part.
I thought of it the other day, and I can't remember a lot of things. Like most of the guys that shot at me, I don't remember their names anymore. There's one guy, I don't think I'll ever forget his name, but I've learned to forgive them for what they did. I don't forget. So you wrote 2 books. Your co-authored book, Fort Worth Cops, The Inside Stories, and also End of Watch, Fort Worth Fallen Officers, 1873 to 2024. Many police, myself included, wanted to write stories about what we went through. What possessed you to do this?
Well, when I first started writing, I had I believe 8 of my friends had been killed on the line of duty. and I started working on our memorial. We didn't have one yet, but we had a memorial planned. So I started working on capturing their stories. And while doing that, I found a number of men that hadn't been found. They had been forgotten by the department over the years. So I was researching and writing their stories and writing about what happened to them. And that led me into writing about Fort Worth's history and understanding the history of the police department and the changes. And as I tell people now, if you want to learn the history of a city, read the old police reports. That's going to tell you everything.
You'll learn a lot. By the way, just do a Google search for $2. Fort Worth Cops, the Inside Stories, and also End of Watch, Fort Worth Fallen Officers, 1873 to 2024. Kevin, hey, thanks for your service, brother. Very much appreciated, and thanks for talking about it on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
A huge thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast version of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, by the way, which is a nationally syndicated radio show. And we broadcast on over 115 radio stations across the United States to more than 44 million combined population. If you like our show, there's two simple things you can do. Go to our website, letradio.com. Add your favorites. Check it often. You can find episodes of the show right there. And the second one involves our Facebook page. It's so easy to find great content, including past episodes of the show. And when you see something that you like, that resonates with you, be sure to share it with your friends. We'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.